The vast chamber of the Galactic Council hummed with the low thrum of translation fields, voices from a dozen worlds blurring into a single discordant chorus. Ambassador Ilara Voss stood at the human delegation's podium, her fingers tracing the edge of the sleek obsidian slab that served as her interface. At 42, she was the youngest envoy humanity had sent in decades, chosen for her unyielding optimism rather than any diplomatic pedigree. Her dark hair was pulled back in a practical braid, and her uniform, simple gray synth weave with a faint emblem of a rising sun, felt like a quiet rebellion amid the council's ostentatious robes and exoskeletons. Beside her, Captain Raj Patel leaned against the railing, arms crossed, his weathered face etched with the scars of too many frontier skirmishes. He was the muscle of the operation, a veteran of the outer colonies who spoke little but observed everything. "This place reeks of stagnation," he muttered, just loud enough for Ilara to hear. His voice carried the gravel of someone who'd breathed asteroid dust for years. Across the aisle, Delegate Lyric of the Vexery hovered on anti-grav tendrils, his bioluminescent skin pulsing a cautious blue. Lyric had been an ally during the early integration talks, his species' empathy making him a bridge between human impulsiveness and the Council's deliberate pace. Ilara glanced at the holographic agenda floating above the central dais. Item 47B, Human Request for Sector Autonomy. The words hung there, unchanging as the session dragged into its third hour. The chair, a towering Kreth elder named Vorith, droned on about precedence and equilibria, his multifaceted eyes reflecting the chamber's sterile lights. The harmony of the collective demands consensus, Vorith intoned, his voice a resonant echo through the amplifiers. Humanity's proposal disrupts the balance forged over millennia. She felt the weight of it then, the accumulated delays, the vetoes on human expansion, the endless committees that had strangled every bold initiative. Earth's representatives had come to the Council 20 years ago, offering fusion tech and terraforming expertise in exchange for a seat at the table. But the table was round and endless, and humanity's fire had dimmed under the chill of procedure. Ilara straightened, activating her podium with a tap. "With respect, Chair Vorith, humanity has waited long enough. Our worlds strain under the quotas you've imposed. Autonomy isn't disruption, it's survival." Murmurs rippled through the assembly, a wave of chittering and hisses. Lyric's tendrils flickered yellow, concern. Raj shifted, his hand brushing the concealed sidearm that protocol ironically allowed for cultural security. Vorith's eyes narrowed, facets glinting. "Survival? The Council has ensured your species' prosperity. To depart would unravel alliances, invite chaos to the core worlds." Ilara met his gaze, her pulse steady despite the knot in her chest. She prepared for this, rehearsed in the dim corridors of the human embassy ship. But the reality was sharper. The scans from home showed failing hydro farms on Mars, refugee swells on Luna, all because the Council hoarded dilithium routes. "Prosperity for whom?" she countered, her voice cutting clean. "We've shared our innovations freely, yet you withhold the stars we've earned. If consensus means paralysis, then yes, we choose to leave." The chamber fell silent, save for the faint whine of recording drones. Vorith leaned forward, his massive form casting a shadow over the dais. "Such words border on sedition, Ambassador. The age of reason binds us all." But in his tone, Ilara caught the first fracture, a hint of fear beneath the authority. Raj leaned in, whispering, "That's our cue. Shuttles prepped if they push back." Lyric drifted closer, his empathy field brushing her mind like a cool breeze. "Ilara, this path, it ends Eurus. Are you certain?" She nodded, the decision crystallizing in that moment. The Council's reason had become a cage, gilded but unyielding. Humanity's departure wouldn't just free them, it would shatter the illusion that held the stars in check. As the session adjourned amid rising protests, Ilara stepped from the podium, the weight of worlds lifting slightly from her shoulders. But outside the chamber doors, the corridors stretched long and shadowed, and she knew the real departure had only just begun. The dim hum of the ship's engines vibrated through the deck plates as Captain Ilara Voss gripped the armrest of her command chair. Her fingers, calloused from years of manual overrides on failing tech, tightened involuntarily. The view screen ahead showed the swirling nebula that had snared their vessel, the Endeavor, like a fisher's net. What should have been a routine jump from the Council's outer rim now trapped them in a gravitational eddy, the colors bleeding into one another, purples and golds twisting like smoke from a dying fire. "Status, Mira?" Ilara asked, her voice steady despite the knot in her gut. She glanced at her engineer, a wiry human with grease-streaked overalls and a perpetual squint from staring into engine cores. Mira didn't look up from her console, her hands flying over the holographic readouts. Shields holding at 60%, but the flux is eating through them. If we don't vent plasma soon, it'll fry the core. And comms are still black. Council's not picking up our distress or they're ignoring it. Ilara nodded, her jaw set. She'd seen worse in the Fringe Wars, back when humans still played by the Council's rules. Now, with the departure edict fresh, humanity pulling out of the Alliance after centuries of one-sided deals, the Endeavor was on its own, hauling the last shipment of colony seeds to uncharted space. No backup. No bureaucracy to bail them out. From the navigation station, Lieutenant Kai Ren leaned forward, his sharp eyes narrowing at the star map. The young officer's wit had gotten them out of more than one scrape, but caution edged his tone now. "Captain, the safe vectors collapsed. We could try the auxiliary thrusters, slingshot around that gas pocket. Risky, but it might give us enough momentum to break free." "Risky how?" Ilara pressed, standing to pace the bridge. Her boots echoed softly against the metal grating, a rhythm that matched her racing thoughts. Kai tapped a sequence, projecting a simulation, the ship arcing through the nebula, engines flaring blue against the haze. "If the pocket destabilizes, we get pulled deeper. Worst case, hull breach. But sitting here? We're driftwood for whatever scavengers prowl this sector." Mira snorted, wiping sweat from her brow with the back of her hand. "Scavengers or not, the Council's probe drones are due in 12 hours. If they find us like this, it'll be their excuse to label the departure irresponsible. Spin it as humans endangering the peace." Ilara stopped pacing, her gaze fixed on the nebula's heart, a pulsing core of ionized gas that lit the bridge in flickering amber. The Council had always viewed humans as the wild card, too gritty, too inventive for their tidy protocols. Leaving meant freedom, but it also meant moments like this. No safety net, just the crew's mettle. "Execute the slingshot," she decided, sliding back into her chair. Mira prepped the vents. "Kai, plot the tightest arc you can. We adapt or we stall." The ship groaned as thrusters ignited, a deep rumble building in the hull. Ilara felt the pull in her bones, the nebula's grip like invisible hands clawing at the Endeavor. Kai's fingers danced over controls, his usual banter silenced by focus. Mira muttered curses under her breath, rerouting power with the precision of a surgeon. They plunged toward the gas pocket, the view screen filling with turbulent clouds. Alarms blared, a shield fluctuation minor but insistent. Ilara's heart pounded, but she kept her voice level. "Steady. We've got this." The ship shuddered, veering into the arc. For a heartbeat, it seemed they might hold. Then the pocket erupted, a cascade of plasma blooming like a flower in the void. The Endeavor bucked, inertial dampeners straining, and Ilara was thrown against her harness. Sparks flew from a nearby panel, the acrid smell of ozone filling the air. "We're clear," Kai shouted, triumph cutting through the chaos. The nebula receded on the screen, stars sharpening into focus. But Myra's face paled as she scanned the damage logs. "Course stable, but we've lost auxiliary power. And that flare, it cooked our long-range sensors. We're blind out here, Captain. No way to call for help even if we wanted to." Ilara unstrapped, rising with a grim smile that didn't reach her eyes. The departure had bought them independence, but at what price? The Council's age of reason might be crumbling without human grit to prop it up, but for her crew the real test was just beginning, navigating the dark with nothing but their own ingenuity. Captain Ilara Voss gripped the armrests of her command chair, the hum of the stellar Nomad's engines vibrating through the deck like a distant heartbeat. The view screen flickered with the asteroid field's debris, chunks of rock tumbling lazily in the void, but her focus was on the sensor readings. "They're gaining," she muttered, her voice steady despite the knot in her stomach. Ilara was the type who planned 3 steps ahead, cautious, methodical, but out here plans frayed like old sails. Beside her, Jax Harlan leaned forward, his fingers dancing over the console. The engineer wiped sweat from his brow, his usual grin replaced by a tight line. Shields at 70%. That council frigate's packing more punch than their diplomats let on. Jax was the spark in the crew, quick with a joke or a fix, but now his wit was holstered. He knew one wrong calculation could end them all. From the navigation station, Dr. Lyra Kane shot a glance over her shoulder. We can't outrun them in this soup. Plotting a slingshot around that big rock. Mark it as Echo 7. Lyra's calm was her anchor, her mind a map of stars and probabilities. She'd argued longest against leaving the council, citing the alliances they'd built over decades, but when humanity's envoys were sidelined one too many times, her loyalty shifted to her own kind. Do it. And hail them again. Maybe reason's not dead yet. The Nomad was humanity's last diplomatic vessel, retrofitted for evacuation after the council's vote to exclude human expansion. What started as a protest departure had turned into a chase when the Krell enforcers, those hulking, protocol-obsessed aliens, declared it a breach of treaty. The stakes weren't just escape, it was proving humans wouldn't beg for scraps in a galaxy that saw them as upstarts. The comms crackled to life. This is Captain Voss of the Stellar Nomad. We're exercising our sovereign right to depart. Stand down, or we'll consider this an act of aggression. Her words hung in the air, clipped and firm. The response came in the Krell's resonant drone, translated by the ship's AI. Human vessel, you violate the Accord of Stars. Return to formation or face interdiction. The Council's reason endures, your impulsiveness threatens it. Jax snorted, rerouting power to thrusters. Impulsiveness? We've been their errand runners for a century. Time to write our own accord. The ship lurched as Lyra executed the maneuver, gravity tugging at their restraints. Echo 7 loomed large, a jagged monolith scarred by eons of impacts, its surface glinting like shattered obsidian. Enter the distant sun. Alarms blared, proximity alert. The frigate had anticipated the path, firing a warning volley that skimmed their hull. Sparks flew from a panel near Jax's station. He slapped it down with a gloved hand, cursing under his breath. Direct hit on the auxiliary array. Comms are glitchy now. Ilara's mind raced. The Council's age of reason was their mantra. Endless debate, no bold moves, progress stalled in committees. Humanity's departure was the fracture, exposing the rot. But if they got caught, it wouldn't just be the Nomad impounded. It could spark reprisals against the colonies they'd left behind. Families, outposts, real lives hanging on this evasion. Adjust course, Lyra said, her voice even as she tapped coordinates. There's a narrow gap through the field, tight but it'll buy us distance. Her fingers blurred on the controls, plotting vectors that danced with the asteroid's unpredictable drifts. The Nomad dove into the gap, engine straining. Rock fragments pinged off the shields like hail on metal, each impact a jolt that rattled Ilara's teeth. Jax monitored the strain, his face illuminated by warning lights. Holding, barely. If we scrape one more, we're venting atmosphere. Behind them, the frigate hesitated, its bulk too cumbersome for the gauntlet. Ilara watched the sensors. The distance ticked up, agonizingly slow. But triumph soured as Lyra's console beeped urgently. Captain, they've launched drones. Small fast. They'll be on us in minutes. Ilara exhaled sharply, the weight of command pressing down. Reason had failed in the council chambers. Now it was grit and guile against the void. Arm countermeasures. We're not going back. The ship surged forward, the asteroid field shadows swallowing them whole, while the drone signatures blinked closer like predatory eyes. Captain Ilara Voss gripped the armrest of her command chair, the hum of the Odyssey's engines vibrating through the deck like a distant heartbeat. The view screen flickered with the sprawling armada of the United Council fleet, their sleek, iridescent hulls forming a reluctant honor guard around the human vessel. It was no blockade, yet, but the tension coiled in the air, thick as the plasma trail streaking the void. They're stalling us, murmured Lieutenant Kai Ren from the navigation console, his fingers dancing over holographic controls. Kai was the steady one, his calm demeanor a counterweight to Ilara's fire. He glanced up, eyes sharp behind his augmented lenses. Fuel efficiency protocols, they call it. But look at their vectors, they're herding us toward the outer relay. The Council had ruled the galaxy's core for centuries with their vaunted age of reason. logic above all, progress measured in edicts and algorithms. Humans had joined a decade ago, bringing grit and improvisation to the table, only to chafe under the endless debates. Now, with humanity's formal withdrawal announced, the Odyssey led the exodus. A single ship carrying diplomats, scientists, and the symbolic ark of human data archives. The rest of the fleet would follow in waves, but this first departure was meant to be clean, symbolic. Instead, it felt like slipping a noose. "Open a channel to the Vexery lead ship," Elara said, her voice cutting through the bridge chatter. The Vexery, with their crystalline exoskeletons and unyielding adherence to protocol, had been the Council's staunchest allies. Ambassador Lyarkan, their envoy, had argued longest against humanity's exit. The comms officer patched through, and Lyarkan's multifaceted face materialized on the screen, facets shifting like oil on water. "Captain Voss, your trajectory deviates from the approved path. Explain." Elara leaned forward, choosing her words like arrows. "Ambassador, we're following the coordinates you provided. If there's an issue, it's on your end." A pause, the Vexery's compound eyes whirring faintly. "Our sensors detect an anomaly in your drive core. A precautionary escort is required to the nearest station for inspection." Kai shot her a sidelong glance, his brow furrowing. "Anomaly?" The Odyssey's fusion drives were human-engineered, robust beasts that had outpaced Council tech in every sim. But if they docked, it would mean delays, days, weeks, while the full human exodus mobilized behind them. The Council's reason demanded consensus. Stalling one ship could unravel the fragile accord, allowing the rest to leave unmolested. "Negative," Elara replied firmly. "Our diagnostics are green. We're proceeding as planned." Lyarkan's facets darkened. "This is not advisable. The void beyond the relay holds uncharted fluctuations. Your species' impulsiveness has led to errors before." The jab stung, a reminder of the skirmish 2 years back when human scouts had jury-rigged a sensor array to map a nebula, saving a Council outpost from a rogue asteroid swarm. The Vexery had called it reckless, humans called it survival. Elara forced a tight smile. "Impulsiveness got us this far, Ambassador. We'll take our chances." The channel closed, and the bridge fell silent save for the soft beeps of status readouts. Kai swiveled his chair. "They're not letting this go easy. Scans show 2 Vexery interceptors peeling off, subtly, but they're on an intercept course." Elara stood, pacing to the tactical display. The holographic starfield bloomed before her, the Odyssey a glowing blue arrow slicing toward the relay's shimmering gate. The interceptors flanked like shadows, their paths curving to box her in. Resource shortage loomed. The relay was the fastest route out of Council space, but forcing a detour would burn fuel reserves, stranding them in hostile fringes where pirate clans prowled. "We adapt," she said, echoing the human creed that had always irked the Council's tidy logics. "Kai, plot a micro-jump. Skim the nebula's edge, use its interference to mask our signature." He hesitated, fingers pausing. "That's tight. The nebula's magnetic storms could fry our shields." "Better fried than fettered." Elara clapped his shoulder, her touch grounding. Around them, the crew, a mix of engineers like Mira, the wiry mechanic with a knack for on-the-fly repairs, nodded, resolve hardening their faces. As the Odyssey banked, engines thrumming louder, the nebula swelled on the viewscreen. A colossal storm of violet gas and lightning-veined clouds, birthing stars in furious bursts. One interceptor veered closer, its hail light pulsing. Elara ignored it, watching Kai's hands blur across the controls. The ship shuddered into the jump, reality folding like paper. Alarms wailed as magnetic tendrils lashed the hull, sparks erupting from a console. Mira was there in an instant, her tools flashing, sealing a breached relay with makeshift welds. They burst through, the nebula spitting them out like indigestible prey. The relay loomed ahead, unblocked now, its archway humming with warp energy. But the viewscreen caught a glimpse. The Vexery ships, disoriented in the interference, trailing sparks of their own. "Clear," Kai breathed, wiping sweat from his brow. Elara exhaled, sinking back into her chair. The cost lingered, a strained drive core, minor hull breaches, but they'd slipped the leash. Behind them, the Council's fleet reformed, their reason bent but not broken. Yet as the Odyssey aligned for the jump, Elara wondered if this was just the first fracture in the galaxy's fragile order. The view screen flickered with static, revealing glimpses of the fractured nebula ahead, a swirling graveyard of ionized gas and debris from the Council's shattered relay station. Her crew, what was left of them, moved with practiced urgency. Lieutenant Kai Ren, the wiry engineer with his quick fingers and sharper tongue, patched auxiliary systems from his console, Dr. Mira Solis, the xenobiologist whose calm demeanor hid a spine of steel, monitored the alien artifacts they'd salvaged. And Ensign Theo Grant, the young navigator, his face pale but set, plotting their evasion course through the chaos. Relays are down across the sector, Kai muttered, wiping sweat from his brow. Council's net is blind. But those pursuers aren't. Drones inbound, closing fast from Vector 7. Ilara nodded, her voice steady. Time to show them why humans don't quit. She leaned forward, eyes narrowing at the tactical overlay. The Council's enforcers, sleek, automated hunters designed for precision takedowns, had been hounding them since the departure vote. Humanity's exodus from the Galactic Council had cracked the fragile alliance wide open, and now the old guard was desperate to plug the leak with Odyssey's captured data core. Mira glanced up from her scanner, her fingers tracing the faint glow of the artifact in its containment field. This relic from the precursor vault, it's rewriting our shields. Subtle, but if we sync it properly, a jolt rocked the ship, alarms blaring as the first drone's plasma skimmed their hull. Theo's hands flew over his controls. Evasive maneuvers. Twisting through the debris field, hold on. The Odyssey bucked, weaving between tumbling chunks of the ruined station. Ilara felt the G-forces press her into the seat, but she kept her focus. Kai, divert power to forward thrusters. Make us a ghost in the mist. He grinned despite the strain, his voice laced with that familiar wit. Ghost? More like a poltergeist. Rerouting now, shields at 60%, but that artifact's boosting Regan. We're bending physics here, Cap. Outside, the nebulous tendrils lit up in electric blues and violets, the debris field a lethal ballet of sharp edges and zero-G traps. Another drone fired, its beams slicing a nearby asteroid in half. Fragments peppered the hull with metallic pings. Theo cursed under his breath, adjusting course by a hair's breadth. They're learning our pattern. We need something they can't predict. Myra's eyes lit with realization. She tapped her console, syncing the artifact's frequency to the ship's core. The precursors used harmonic dissonance. Let me invert it. Turn their targeting against them. Ilara trusted her implicitly. Mira had been the one to decode the vault's warnings back on the station. The same warnings that exposed the Council's corruption. Do it. Theo, give her a window. The ensign nodded, sweat beading on his forehead. He punched in a wild spiral, the ship groaning as it danced on the edge of structural integrity. Drones swarmed closer, their sensor pings echoing like predator calls. Now, Mira commanded. A low thrum built in the engineering bay, the artifact pulsing in rhythm with the nebulous storms. Invisible waves rippled out, interfering with the drone's arrays. One veered sharply, slamming into a debris chunk and erupting in a silent fireball. The others faltered, their formations breaking as false echoes multiplied across the field. Kai hooped. It's working. They're chasing shadows. But Ilara saw the cost on the readouts. The artifact's energy draw was spiking, straining the reactors. How long can we hold it? Myra's face tightened. Minutes at best. It's ancient tech, brittle. One overload and it shatters. The ship shuddered again, a near miss grazing their flank. Theo's voice cracked with tension. 2 more drones breaking through. Direct line, adapt, Ilara said, her mind racing. Humans had always thrived on improvisation, not the Council's rigid protocols. Kai, vent plasma from the aft vents. Mimic a drone signature. Draw them off. He paused for a split second, then barked a laugh. Clever. Firing up the mixers. Here goes nothing. A burst of engineered exhaust trailed behind them, a deceptive plume that the confused drones latched onto. They peeled away, converging on the Phantom, buying precious seconds. Through the view screen, the nebula's heart loomed, a dense core of magnetic storms that could fry circuits or provide cover. Ilara made the call. Full burn into the core. Mira, ease off the artifact once we're in. Let's vanish. The crew braced as the Odyssey plunged deeper, the storms whipping around them like furious specters. Sparks danced across consoles, but the ship held. Theo guided them through the maelstrom, his cautious nature yielding to the moment's demand for boldness. As the drone's signals faded into static, Elara allowed herself a breath. They'd escaped for now. But the artifact's glow dimmed, cracks spider-webbing its surface. A lingering consequence. Their edge was fragile, much like the Council's crumbling reason. Humanity's departure had ignited this fire, and quenching it would demand more than tricks. It would demand grit. The dim hum of the auxiliary engines vibrated through the deck plates as Elena gripped the console, her knuckles whitening against the unyielding metal. The bridge of the Odyssey felt smaller now, the air thick with the scent of scorched circuits and recycled oxygen. Mateus hunched over the engineering panel beside her, his fingers dancing across holographic readouts, sweat beading on his forehead despite the chill. "It's holding barely," he muttered, voice laced with that familiar edge of sarcasm. "But if the Council's interceptors get any closer, we're not outrunning them, we're outgunned." Behind them, Dr. Lyra, the avian diplomat who defected with them, paced the narrow space, her iridescent feathers ruffling with each agitated step. Her species, the Zorith, had always prided themselves on logic, on the Council's endless debates, but now her sharp eyes darted to the viewscreen where the pursuing fleet loomed like shadows against the nebula's glow. "This was folly," she said, not for the first time, her beak clicking softly. The departure protocols were clear. Humanity's exit destabilizes everything. Trade routes, alliances. They've mobilized the enforcers because of you. Elena shot her a glance, steady but unyielding. Because of us. We didn't start this. The Council choked us out, endless sanctions vetoing our colony claims. We're not running, we're reclaiming what's ours. She straightened, ignoring the ache in her shoulders from hours at the helm. The plan had been simple. Slip through the outer rim undetected, using the nebula's interference to mask their signature. But the early jump had backfired. A relay beacon had pinged their position, and now 3 enforcer ships closed in, their weapons arrays charging with ominous pulses of blue energy. Mateus cursed under his breath as an alarm blared. "Shields at 60%. That last volley clipped us good." He rerouted power with a swipe, the lights flickering in response. Elena nodded, her mind racing through options. The Odyssey was no warship, just a sturdy explorer retrofitted for the long haul, crewed by a skeleton team of humans who'd volunteered for this breakaway. No fleet to call on, no backup. She keyed the comms, voice calm despite the knot in her gut. "All hands brace for evasive. Mateus, give me everything you've got on thrusters." The ship lurched as he complied, the inertial dampeners straining against the sudden burst. On the viewscreen, the lead enforcer, a sleek Zorith vessel, all sharp angles and efficiency, fired again, the beam grazing their flank. Sparks erupted from a nearby panel, and Lyra flinched, her talons scraping the floor. "They're hailing," Elena announced, accepting the channel. The face that appeared was stern, a human admiral from the Council's integrated forces, his uniform crisp and betraying no emotion. "Captain Reyes," he said, voice amplified and cold. "This is your final warning. Reverse course and surrender. Humanity's unilateral departure violates the accord. The Council will not tolerate anarchy." Elena leaned forward, meeting his gaze. "Admiral Voss. Last I checked, the accord was a suggestion, not a chain. We're done playing by rules that starve our people." She cut the line before he could respond, her jaw set. Mateus glanced up, eyebrow raised. "Bold. Stupid but bold. What's the play now? We can't fight them head-on." Lyra stopped pacing, her feathers settling as she considered the readouts. For all her caution, there was a spark in her eyes, the same one that had driven her to join them. "The nebula's core," she said slowly. "It's unstable, laced with plasma storms. The Enforcer's sensors are calibrated for open space. They won't risk it. If we dive in, we might lose them." Elena waited, the risk coiling tight in her chest. The Odysseus hull could take the heat, maybe, but one wrong surge and they'd be vapor. Mateus shook his head. "That's suicide. Our NAV systems aren't rated for that soup." But he was already plotting the course, fingers flying. Elena made the call. "We dive. It's our only shot." The ship plunged forward, the nebula swallowing them whole. Colors bled across the viewscreen, swirls of violet and crimson like veins in some cosmic beast. Alarms wailed as the first plasma tendril lashed out, rocking them sideways. Elena clung to her station, shouting over the din, "Steady her." Matthias wrestled the controls, his wit forgotten in the grit of the moment. Lyra braced against the wall, murmuring calculations under her breath, her logical mind now their lifeline. Deeper in, the interference thickened, static crackling across comms. The enforcer's signatures faded, but so did their own instruments. A shudder ran through the frame as a storm wave hit, buckling a bulkhead somewhere below. "Hull breach in Cargo Bay 3. Matthias yelled. Elena's heart sank. Supplies lost, maybe irreplaceable tech for the new colonies. But they were through, emerging on the far side into clear space, the pursuers nowhere in sight. She exhaled, slumping back. "We made it." Lyra nodded, a rare warmth in her expression. "For now. But they've seen our hand. The council won't forget this insult." Matthias wiped his brow, forcing a grin. "Yeah, well, neither will we. Next stop, uncharted stars." The Odyssey pressed on, scarred but unbroken, the weight of their choice settling like stardust on the bridge. Captain Elara Voss gripped the armrests of her command chair, the hum of the Odysseus engines vibrating through the deck like a distant heartbeat. The view screen flickered with the debris field ahead, shattered hulls from the Council's abandoned outposts, drifting lazily in the void. Her crew, down to just her engineer Kai Ren, and the tentative alliance with Lyric, the avian diplomat who defected with them, felt thinner than ever. Kai's fingers danced over the console, rerouting power to the shields, his brow furrowed in that familiar mix of focus and quiet defiance. "They're gaining," Lyric squawked from the navigation station, his feathers ruffling with agitation. The Council Enforcer's ships, sleek, predatory wedges, were closing in from the flank, their energy signatures pulsing like warnings. Elara had banked on the debris as cover, a clever dodge to slip away from the armada chasing humanity's Exodus fleet. But the field was denser than scans predicted, and their initial thrust had snagged a sensor array on a rogue fragment. Now the Odyssey limped, auxiliary thrusters straining. "Options?" Elara asked, her voice steady despite the knot in her gut. She wasn't one for panic. Humans didn't survive by flinching. Kai glanced up, wiping sweat from his shaved scalp. "We vent the forward bays, use the explosive decompression to push us clear. But it'll cost us the cargo holds. Food synths, med supplies, gone." Lyric's beak clicked in distress. "The Council will see it as desperation. They expect us to fold, not fight dirty." Elara's eyes narrowed at the screen, watching the lead enforcer vessel fire a probing shot that lit up the stars. It grazed their hull, a searing line of plasma that made the ship groan. Desperation? No. This was adaptation, the human edge that had built empires from dust. "Do it, Kai." And Lyric, plot a vector through the thickest cluster. "If they want to follow, let them choke on it." Kai punched the sequence, and the ship shuddered as atmosphere blasted into the vacuum. The view screen showed the debris shifting, propelled by the force, forming a temporary barrier. The Odyssey surged forward, weaving through the chaos, but alarms blared, hull integrity dropping, a secondary breach in engineering. Elara unstrapped and bolted for the lower decks, Kai on her heels. Lyric stayed at NAV, his talons scraping the controls as he murmured calculations in his native tongue. Smoke curled from a ruptured conduit when they arrived, sparks dancing like fireflies. Kai dove under a panel, tools clanking, while Elara sealed a flickering bulkhead, her suit's gloves slick with coolant. "Pressure holding?" she called over the whine. "Barely," Kai grunted, yanking a wire. "One more hit, and we're venting crew not cargo." The ship bucked again, another enforcer volley rattling the frame. Elara imagined the Council's commanders in their sterile bridges, smug in their superior tech, blind to the grit that powered human resolve. But doubt crept in. What if this was the backfire? The debris plan had bought time, but at what price? Their fleet was scattered now, the Odyssey a lone spark in the dark. Lyric's voice crackled over comms. "Incoming tight beam." They're hailing, demanding surrender. Elara straightened, meeting Kai's eyes through the haze. Surrender meant the end of everything, humanity's independence, Lyric's fragile hope for reform. "Patch it through." The avian's holographic face appeared on a nearby panel, his expression a mask of calculated calm. "Captain Voss, your defiance dishonors the Accords." Power down or we board. She leaned in, her reflection stern beside his. Accords you shattered when you blockaded our departure. We're not stopping lyrics with us and neither are you. A pause, then the hologram flickered out. No reply, just the roar of engines closing in. Kai sealed the breach with a final weld, the acrid smell fading slightly. We're clear for now but fuel's critical. One jump left maybe? Elara nodded, the weight settling deeper. The Council's age of reason was crumbling but so was their own margin for error. As they raced back to the bridge, the stars streaked by, a reminder that triumph wasn't given. It was carved from the void, one desperate choice at a time. Captain Elara Voss gripped the armrests of her command chair, the hum of the stellar Nomad's engines vibrating through the deck like a distant heartbeat. The view screen flickered with the debris field ahead, a graveyard of shattered Council dreadnoughts, remnants from the last skirmish that had fractured the Alliance. Her crew, a tight-knit trio including the ever-cautious navigator Lyric from the avian Ketheri species and the sharp-tongued engineer Jax Harlan, watched in tense silence. Humanity's exodus wasn't just a retreat, it was a severance, cutting ties with the Council's bloated bureaucracy that had choked innovation for centuries. But the stakes had sharpened. Intel suggested a splinter faction of enforcers trailing them, ready to ignite the field into a trap. Status on the evasion protocols? Elara asked, her voice steady despite the knot in her gut. She was the brave one, always charging forward, but even she felt the weight of 2,000 souls aboard, families who'd bet everything on this leap into the unknown. Jax leaned over his console, fingers dancing across holographic readouts. Shields at 80%, Cap. That last microasteroid clipped us, but I've rerouted power. We're not outrunning those bastards yet, their signatures are gaining. His wit usually lightened the bridge, but now it edged with grit, eyes narrowed at the encroaching blips. Lyric's feathers ruffled, a sign of his caution bubbling over. He tilted his head, beaked mouth clicking softly. We should alter course to Sector 7 Alpha. The density there might mask us, but the radiation spikes could fry our sensors. His words carried the hesitation of someone who'd seen too many Council gambits end in feathers scattered across vacuum. Elara waited, the air thick with recycled oxygen and unspoken fears. The plan had been simple. Slip through the field, link up with the forward convoy, and vanish into uncharted space. But the Enforcer's jammer had backfired their initial dodge, forcing this detour. Losing the convoy meant isolation, stranding them without resupply, real costs like dimming life support or rationing the hydroponics that kept morale from cracking. Make the turn, Lyric, she decided, rising to pace the narrow bridge. A single asteroid loomed in the viewport, its cratered surface scarred like an ancient wound, tumbling lazily toward them. Jax prepped the decoy drones. If they bite, we buy time. The ship banked sharply, inertial dampeners whining as they plunged into the thicker haze. Alarms blared, enforcer locks painting their hull. Jax muttered a curse, launching the drones in a swarm that mimicked their signature. Explosions bloomed silently outside, the debris field igniting in brief, furious stars. But the reprieve shattered. A direct hit rocked the Nomad, sparks erupting from a panel near Lyric Station. He squawked, talons scrambling to stabilize. Hull breach in auxiliary bay. Sealing it now, lost 2 crew in the blast. Elara's jaw tightened, the loss hitting like shrapnel. Not abstract risks anymore, faces she knew gone in a flicker. Hold course. We're not turning back for anyone. Her resolve masked the tremor in her hands, human grit pushing through the ache. As the field thinned, a new signal pierced the static. The convoy's beacon, faint but calling. Jax grinned fiercely, wiping sweat from his brow. That's our ticket out. But Cap, those enforcers are regrouping. We adapt or we burn. Elara nodded, settling back into her chair. The stars beyond the field whispered of freedom, but the shadow of pursuit lingered, a reminder that departure's price was paid in blood and unyielding will. Captain Elara Voss gripped the armrests of her command chair, the hum of the Endeavor's engines vibrating through the deck like a distant heartbeat. The view screen flickered with static, revealing glimpses of the nebulous swirling chaos, a graveyard of shattered hulls from ships that had dared the vortex before. Her crew, down to just her, Dr. Kale, and the engineer Mira, had pushed the old freighter to its limits. Kale, the cautious Zillion diplomat with his iridescent scales dimmed by exhaustion, hunched over the sensor array, his claws tapping erratically. "Readings are stabilizing," Kale murmured, his voice a low rasp. "But the gravitational shears are pulling at our warp coils. One wrong nudge and we're debris." Elara nodded, her jaw set. She wasn't one for panic. Grit had gotten her this far, from the Council's crumbling halls to this desperate dash for the Outer Rim. Humanity's exodus had fractured the Alliance, leaving species like Kale's to fend for themselves against the encroaching Vorik swarm. The Vorik, those biomechanical horrors, had exploited the Council's hesitation, their tendrils now snaking through the nebula's core. The Endeavor carried the last data core, proof of the Council's betrayal, and it had to reach the human colonies intact. Mira burst onto the bridge, her coveralls smeared with coolant, wiping sweat from her brow. The witty engineer always had a quip, but her eyes were sharp now, focused. "Warp drives holding barely. I rerouted power from life support, air's getting thin but it'll buy us time." She glanced at the screen, where a Vorik scout pod emerged from the gas clouds, its jagged spines glinting like obsidian teeth. "Incoming." "They're locking on." Tension coiled in Alara's chest, but she kept her voice steady. "Evasive pattern Delta." Mira armed the pulse cannons. "Kale, any word from the fleet?" Kale shook his head, frustration etching lines on his scaled face. "Nothing. The nebula's jamming everything. If we don't punch through soon, the swarm will overrun the departure point." His people had begged her to stay to fight the Council's corruption from within, but Elara knew better. Reason had failed, action was humanity's legacy. The ship lurched as the Vorik pod fired a plasma lance, grazing the shields in a shower of sparks. Alarms blared, red lights pulsing across the console. Elara yanked the controls, rolling the Endeavor into a tight spiral. The nebula's colors blurred outside, violets and crimsons twisting like living flames. Mira manned the weapons, her fingers flying. Firing. A burst of energy lanced out, clipping the pod's flank. It shuddered, venting atmosphere, but more shapes loomed in the distance, a full tendril of the swarm converging. "We can't outrun them," Kale said, his caution cracking into urgency. "The shears will tear us apart first." Elara's mind raced, piecing together Myra's earlier ramblings about the nebula's magnetic fields. "Mira, can we use the shears against them? Ride the gravity wave, slingshot the pod into it?" Myra's eyes lit up, a grin breaking through the strain. "Risky as hell, but yeah. It'll fry our coils though. One-way ticket." "Do it." Elara's decision hung in the air, camaraderie binding them tighter than any council oath. Kale hesitated, then nodded, his trust in her ingenuity overriding doubt. As Mira initiated the maneuver, the ship groaned, metal protesting the strain. The Vorik closed in, their hive mind chatter a faint screech over the comms. Elara watched the pod veer off course, caught in the artificial pull, slamming into a sheer wall. It exploded in a brilliant cascade of debris, buying them precious minutes. But the cost hit hard. The warp drive whined to a halt, consoles flickering. Life support gauges dipped lower, the air growing stale. They were adrift now, the nebula's heart pulsing around them, the swarm's distant roar a promise of pursuit. Elara met her crew's gazes, resolve hardening. The data core's light blinked steadily in its cradle, a beacon of what they'd fight for. One more push, and perhaps the Council's age of reason would truly end, not in silence but in the fire of departure. The dim hum of the Council chamber's life support systems was the only sound that broke the silence, a mechanical whisper echoing off walls etched with the sigils of a dozen worlds. Ambassador Lyra Voss gripped the edge of her console, her knuckles pale against the polished alloy. She'd always prided herself on her caution, on measuring every word before it left her lips, but now doubt clawed at her resolve. The holographic display flickered, showing the human vessel, Endeavor *, hanging in the void like a defiant specter, its engines idling as if mocking the fleet arrayed against it. "They're not responding to hails," Captain Thorne muttered from across the chamber, his voice gravelly with fatigue. Thorne was the brave one, the soldier who'd charged into skirmishes on behalf of the Council without hesitation. But even he paced now, his boots thudding softly on the deck. Beside him, Engineer Callie tinkered with a portable scanner, her witty barbs silenced for once as she frowned at the readouts. The three of them, Voss, Thorn, and Callie, had been the Council's last hope to broker peace, a makeshift team thrown together when the human delegation walked out 3 cycles ago. The external challenge had started as a resource dispute. The humans demanded unrestricted access to the nebula's rare isotopes, vital for their warp drives, while the Council cited ecological safeguards. But it escalated when Endeavour refused to yield, their captain broadcasting a manifesto that dismissed the Council's Age of Reason as stagnation. Now, with the fleet's blockade tightening, the stakes were life or death, not just for the ship, but for the fragile alliances holding the quadrant together. One wrong move, and the isotopes could fuel a war instead of progress. Voss straightened, forcing her voice steady. "We can't fire on them. Not yet. Thorn, take us closer, flank their port side, but keep shields nominal." Thorn nodded, his jaw set, and relayed the order to the bridge. The chamber lurched gently as the cruiser Aegis adjusted course, stars streaking past the viewport in blurred lines. Callie looked up from her scanner, eyes sharp. Their hulls modulating frequencies. "It's not standard evasion. Looks like they're prepping some kind of field generator. If they activate it in the nebula, we lose containment on the isotopes. Everything destabilizes." Her fingers flew over the controls, pulling up a simulation, swirling clouds of gas igniting into plasma storms engulfing the fleet. Thorn stopped pacing. "Then we board them. Force a shutdown from inside." It was bold, reckless even, but his eyes burned with that unyielding grit humans seemed to carry like a second skin. Voss hesitated, the weight of protocol pressing down. The Council had forbidden direct intervention, fearing it would shatter the last threads of diplomacy. But watching Endeavour's silhouette grow larger, she saw the truth. Reason alone wouldn't bridge this chasm. "Prep the shuttle," she said finally. "Callie, you're with me. Thorn, cover our approach." As the shuttle detached with a hiss of escaping air, Voss glanced back at the Aegis, its lights fading into the nebula's glow. The plan was simple: dock, infiltrate the engineering bay, disable the generator. But simplicity was a lie in the face of human ingenuity. Alarms blared suddenly, the shuttle shuddering as Endeavour's point defense turrets swiveled to life, not firing but herding them like prey into tighter orbits. "They're toying with us," Callie whispered, her usual sarcasm edged with awe. The viewport filled with the human ship's underbelly, ports venting exotic particles that danced like fireflies. Voss's heart pounded. This wasn't aggression, it was a demonstration, a clever adaptation turning the nebula's hazards against the pursuers. Thorn's voice crackled over the comm: "Incoming debris field, nebula ejections. Evade left." The shuttle banked hard, chunks of ionized rock grazing the hull with sparks. Voss gripped her harness, the tension coiling tighter. Their early plan to hail and negotiate had backfired spectacularly. The humans had jammed frequencies, forcing this desperate gambit. Inside Endeavour, unbeknownst to them, Captain Reyes watched the intruders approach on his own screens, a grim smile tugging at his lips. He'd anticipated this, Council envoys predictable in their earnestness. "Let them board," he told his crew. "Show them why we're leaving." The airlock cycled open just as the shuttle clamped on, and Voss stepped into the corridor, phaser drawn, the scent of recycled air thick with the tang of solder and sweat. Callie moved first, scanner humming, but a bulkhead sealed behind them with a clang. Lights flickered, gravity shifting subtly. Artificial? Voss spun, facing a human engineer who emerged from the shadows, hands raised but eyes defiant. "Welcome aboard," the woman said, her tone laced with wry amusement. "You want the generator? This way. But you'll have to earn it." The chase began through labyrinthine halls, humans appearing like ghosts to redirect, not attack, pushing buttons that vented steam or altered paths, testing the intruder's wits. Thorn's voice urged from the comm, "Hold position, I'm punching through the debris." But Voss knew better. This was their trial, a gauntlet of camaraderie forged in crisis. By the time they reached the core, sweat slicked and breathing hard, the generator thrummed to life. Voss leveled her phaser, but the lead engineer, Reyes himself, stood before it, unflinching. "Reason failed us," he said simply. "We're building something better. Join or get out of the way." Callie glanced at Voss. Captain Alara Voss gripped the armrests of her command chair, the hum of the Odysseus engines vibrating through the deck like a distant heartbeat. The view screen flickered with data streams from the sensor array, painting a grim picture. The Council's armada, a ragtag fleet of mismatched vessels from a dozen worlds, was fracturing under the onslaught. Krellian plasma bolts streaked across the void, carving glowing scars into the hulls of allied ships. Humanity's departure had left a void, and now the ancient anomaly they'd ignored for cycles, a writhing rift spewing unstable energy, was tearing the galaxy's fragile peace apart. Status on the relay? Ilara barked, her voice steady despite the knot in her gut. Beside her, Dr. Lyric, the avian diplomat from the now-shattered council, hunched over a console, his feathers ruffled in agitation. He'd begged her to turn back to intervene, but pride and protocol had kept her course set for human space, until the distress beacon from the Aetheris pierced their comms. "Relay's holding at 30%, Lyric replied, his beak clicking sharply. "But the anomaly's feedback is modulating our signal. If we don't stabilize it soon, the fleet loses coordination entirely." Across the bridge, Engineer Tomas Ruiz wiped sweat from his brow, fingers flying over the engineering panel. The human's wiry frame belied his unyielding focus. He jury-rigged the Odyssey's core to boost the relay's output, drawing from the ship's auxiliary power. "I've rerouted everything non-essential," he said, not looking up. "Life support's dipping, but it'll buy us time. Captain, that Krellian cruiser is vectoring in, shields won't take another hit like the last one." Ilara nodded, her mind racing. The plan had been simple. Slip in under cloak, deploy the relay to link the fleet's fractured command net, then extract before the Krellians, emboldened by the Council's disarray, could lock on. But the anomaly's pulses had scrambled their stealth field mid-approach, turning a ghost run into a firefight. 2 Allied destroyers already drifted as debris, their crews silenced in the cold expanse. "Initiate evasive pattern Delta," she ordered. The Odyssey shuddered as thrusters fired, weaving through a barrage of incoming fire. A near miss lit the bridge in red, alarms blaring. Lyric squawked, clutching the console as sparks flew from a nearby panel. "We can't keep this up," the diplomat hissed, his compound eyes wide. "The Council's age of reason dies here if we fail. Humanity's ingenuity was supposed to bridge us, not abandon us to this madness." Ilara shot him a glance, her jaw tight. "We're not abandoning anyone. Tomas, how's the adaptation protocol coming? Can we modulate the relay to counter the anomaly's interference?" Ruiz grunted, pulling a charred circuit from the wall and replacing it with a makeshift bypass. "Almost. The rift's emitting variable harmonics. It's like trying to tune a violin with a sledgehammer. But if I sync our gravitic emitters to mimic the pulse, we might invert the feedback loop. Risky though. Could overload the core." "Do it," Ilara said without hesitation. The ship lurched again, a Krellian torpedo glancing off the hull. She could feel the weight of it all, the Council's pleas echoing in her comm logs, the human enclaves waiting beyond the frontier, safe but isolated. Leaving had been a statement, a rejection of endless bureaucracy, but this was the cost manifesting in fire and void. Lyric straightened, his wings half unfurled in resolve. "I'll coordinate with the fleet remnants. Transmit the modulation frequencies once you have them." As Ruiz initiated the sequence, the Odyssey's lights dimmed, power surging toward the relay. Ilara watched the view screen, the anomaly pulsing like a malevolent heart, birthing tendrils of warped space that snagged a distant frigate. The early plan had backfired spectacularly, the stealth insertion alerting the Krellians, drawing their opportunistic raid, but adaptation was humanity's creed. Grit in the gears, camaraderie in the chaos. A low groan echoed through the hull as the core strained. Ruiz's voice cut through the tension, modulation active. "Relaying now, fleet respond." Faint acknowledgments crackled over the comms, ships realigning in the net's fragile web. But the Krellian cruiser closed in, weapons hot, and Ilara knew the triumph was fleeting. The bridge crew exchanged glances, a silent pact forming amid the alarms. One more push, one clever twist, and perhaps they'd earn the stars back from the brink. Yet the anomaly's glow deepened, hinting at deeper consequences, ripples that might chase them even into human space. The bridge of the Endeavor hummed with a quiet that felt heavier than vacuum. Captain Ilara Voss gripped the armrests of her command chair, her knuckles pale against the worn synth leather. The view screen dominated the forward bulkhead, framing the swirling nebula that had been their sanctuary, and their trap, for what felt like lifetimes. Behind her, Dr. Kai Ren hunched over the auxiliary console, his fingers dancing across holographic readouts, sweat beading on his forehead despite the recycled air's chill. Lieutenant Mira Solis stood at the tactical station, her posture rigid, eyes flicking between the sensor feeds and the captain's back. They were three now, the survivors of a crew whittled down by the Council's relentless pursuit, but in this moment, their bond felt unbreakable, forged in the fires of betrayal and ingenuity. Ilara's voice cut through the tension, steady as the ship's inertial dampeners. "Status, Kai." "Shields at 20%, he replied, not looking up. "The nebula's interference is masking us, but the Council's dreadnoughts are closing in. They've adapted their scanners. Our little EMP trick from the asteroid field bought us time, but not enough." His tone carried the weight of exhaustion, but there was no defeat in it. Kai had always been the thinker, the one who saw patterns where others saw chaos, and his mind was still turning, piecing together scraps of data like a puzzle only half solved. Mira snorted softly, her wit a shield against the encroaching dread. Adapted? Those bureaucratic slugs finally figured out how to unplug and replug? Impressive. She adjusted a targeting array, her movements precise, born of years drilling in sims that never quite prepared for this. Brave to a fault, Mira had been the first to volunteer for the boarding party that crippled the Council's relay station, even when it meant facing down energy lances with nothing but a jury-rigged pulse rifle. Now, with their armaments depleted, her role had shifted to Guardian, watching for the inevitable breach. Ilara allowed herself a thin smile, but it didn't reach her eyes. The challenge had started as a diplomatic snafu, a human delegation challenging the Council's edicts on expansion, only to uncover their iron grip on the galaxy's resources, enforced by a fleet that crushed dissent like insects. What began as negotiations spiraled into sabotage, then flight as humanity's fragile alliance with the outer colonies declared independence. The stakes had never been abstract. Lose this, and Earth became another footnote in the Council's archives, its people rationed into oblivion. Their early plan to slip through the nebula's magnetic storms using modified grav plates had backfired spectacularly, 2 crew lost to a cascade failure, the ship limping on auxiliary power. But humans adapted. They always did. Options? Ilara asked, her gaze fixed on the nebula's glowing tendrils, like veins pulsing with forbidden energy. Kai straightened, rubbing his chin. "We can't outrun them." "Outgun them?" "Not anymore." "But the nebula's core, it's unstable, a plasma vortex. If we detonate the remaining fusion cells at the right vector, it could chain react. Create a shockwave that scrambles their systems long enough for a blind jump to the relay point." Mira spun her chair halfway around. "And us? We're not exactly armored for nebula surfing." "Risky," Ilara agreed, but her mind was already mapping trajectories, weighing the cost. The Council had called humanity irrational, a spark of chaos in their ordered cosmos. Leaving would shatter that order, ignite rebellions they'd suppressed for centuries. But staying meant erasure. "We'll thread it." Mira, plot the course. Kai, prep the cells, manual arming if you have to. The ship shuddered as the first probing shots from the dreadnoughts lit the void, harmless grazes against the nebula's haze. Myra's hands flew over the controls, cursing under her breath as she compensated for the interference. Engaging evasive. "Hold on, this is gonna rattle your teeth." Kai worked in silence, his cautious nature yielding to necessity, splicing wires with tools scavenged from the medbay. A spark jumped, singeing his sleeve, but he pressed on, muttering calculations. Ilara watched them both, the camaraderie a quiet fire in her chest. No speeches, no grand declarations, just action the human way. Alarms blared as the Endeavor dove into the vortex's heart, the hull groaning under gravitational shear. The view screen fractured with interference, colors bleeding into a maelstrom. Mira hooped as she banked hard, dodging a crystalline outcrop that could have shredded them. "Eat that, you oversized filing cabinets." Kai's voice crackled over the intercom from engineering. "Cells armed. Detonation in 30. Get clear." The explosion bloomed like a newborn star, the plasma igniting in a cascade of fury. The shockwave rippled outward, frying the Council's sensors in an electromagnetic howl. Ilara punched the jump initiators, the ship lurching into warp as reality folded around them. They emerged on the far side of the nebula, the relay point a beacon in the black. Earth waited beyond, and with it the dawn of something new. But as the stars stabilized, Ilara noted the damage logs. Structural integrity compromised, life support strained. They'd won their departure, but the Council's age of reason? Shattered, yes, but the galaxy would bear the scars, and so would they. Mira slumped back, grinning through the fatigue. Homeward bound, Captain? Ilara nodded, the weight of command settling like an old friend. Homeward. In the quiet that followed, the Endeavor pressed on, a testament to grit and the unyielding spark of human will.